Hello and a very warm welcome back to the channel. My name is Ben Hocking and today we're going to be looking at whether the Mercedes dynasty can be stopped once and for all. Of course, Mercedes having such a dominant time in the hybrid era. Many would say they have rivaled the dominance that Ferrari had in the early noughties. Many, including myself, would say they have already surpassed what they were able to achieve. But today we look at exactly what Red Bull need to achieve in order to stop them. What do they need to conjure up? There are 7 different elements, in my opinion, that need to come together. And whilst some might argue that you'd only need 4 or 5 of them added together in order to stop Mercedes, I think it's a testament to how successful Mercedes have been and what they have been able to develop as a team that I really believe all 7 of these must happen simultaneously, at least to some degree, for Red Bull to stand a chance at beating Mercedes. Now, I'm not going to turn this into an actual prediction in itself. I'm just going to focus on what it is they would need to do rather than their chances of actually doing it. But there's no doubt whatsoever, these stars need to align for Red Bull. And I'll kick off with this first one. And it's focused on their new driver, Sergio Perez, for 2021. A very out there move for Red Bull. They haven't typically gone outside of their program looking for drivers in recent years. You could argue that it is indicative of how poor they have been in terms of managing their drivers in recent years. But there's no doubt about it, Sergio Perez deserves this opportunity. Many will say that Sergio Perez's standout season in 2020 was enough for him to get the nod, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that. But those who've been paying attention know that Sergio Perez's 2020 season was merely an addition to what he's done in previous years. Sergio Perez has been quality for a long time, and this opportunity, he absolutely deserves it. Now it's a question of whether he can step up and he can be that reliable number 2 driver that Red Bull have, without a doubt, been lacking for the last 2 years. Now, Sergio Perez, this is his first opportunity in a good car, quote unquote. Good car, top of the range almost. Sergio Perez had the opportunity, as we know, in 2013 at McLaren, and many would argue that that was his first opportunity at the big time. But bear in mind, even though McLaren was a big team at the time and is still a big team now, McLaren that year were no good. That car was awful. And people who will tell you that that was his first opportunity in a great car are merely wrong. You know, Jenson Button wasn't able to put together 80 points in that car. Bear in mind that Sergio Perez went well over the 100 mark in 2020 in that Racing Point. I wouldn't even say it's in the top 3 cars that Sergio Perez has had in his career. So I really think this is his first opportunity in a team where he is capable of getting consistent podiums week on week. I think he's going to be up to the challenge, quite frankly, but it's still an unknown. We don't know what we're going to get yet, and he has to step up in that respect. And not only does it need to be one in every few races, it needs to be consistent. He probably needs to end up with well into double figures in terms of podiums for the season if they are going to take down Mercedes. And not only is it his first year in what I would consider to be a great car, it's his first time moving teams in 7 years. Prior to him moving away from Racing Point, it was only Lewis Hamilton that could claim to have been at a team longer than Sergio Perez. He spent the entirety of the hybrid era at that team through the few guises that it was, you know, Racing Point and Force India, of course. What's really interesting is Sergio Perez's record against teammates in his entire career. Of course, that spans 10 years now, and he's 7-3 against teammates, which is an pretty impressive feat given the relatively good standard of teammates that he's had. But what you'll notice is the 3 losses all have something in common. His first year at Sauber in 2011, his one and only year at McLaren in 2013, and his first year at Force India in 2014. His 3 losses have all been in his first years at teams. And now I'm not actually making the point here that Sergio Perez is poor when he moves to a team for the first time, even though that record is 7-0 in second seasons and beyond and 0-3 in first seasons. I don't think it's a Perez specific issue. I think this is an issue F1 wide. Drivers that go to a team, even if they are the better driver, can sometimes struggle against a more established teammate at that particular team. I think Renault is a really good example of that over the last few years. Carlos Sainz goes to Renault against Nico Hülkenberg. I think many would argue they're pretty well matched. I would give Sainz the edge. But Hülkenberg was the better driver when they were teammates. And I think a huge factor in that is that Hülkenberg was there for a couple of years before Sainz got there. And you could almost argue the same with Ricciardo versus Hülkenberg once Sainz had left the team. Yes, Ricciardo did have the edge over Hülkenberg towards the end of the season, but Hülkenberg was the better driver early on, even though I'm sure many, including myself, would agree Ricciardo is the better driver of the two. So going to a new team is difficult. It's really difficult, and we'll see how he copes with it in the new year. Secondly, Max Verstappen. This one isn't too much of a factor, but he just needs to keep doing what he's doing. In my opinion, there is an elite of Formula One, and it comprises of two drivers, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, and I don't think there's anyone else in Formula One who is on their level. Charles Leclerc is perhaps that one step behind and has the potential to get there, but I don't think he's there yet. Max Verstappen was phenomenal in 2020, and you could argue it's actually representative of his performance over the last few years as well. Apart from Turkey, which I think was his worst race of the year, and the one race where he really screwed up and had the opportunity to take the victory, with the exception of that Grand Prix, whenever Max Verstappen finished a race, he was on the podium. That is ultimate consistency. And you can definitely draw comparisons here with Lewis Hamilton. Now, Lewis Hamilton, in his first few years of his career, I've always believed that Lewis Hamilton has had elite pace. From that very first race in Australia 2007, he has had unbelievable pace. But there wasn't that added element at the beginning of his career, and understandably so. He didn't have that experience, and he didn't have the experience which would enable him to have consistency. And I don't think he managed to fully unlock that consistency until he got to Mercedes. Now we see that Lewis Hamilton is not only quick, he is so consistently quick that the mistakes he makes are so rare, and you just have to pounce on them, and no driver really has been able to over the last few years. Max Verstappen, I feel, is going into a very similar stage in his career. I don't think he's quite there yet, but he's definitely getting there, and he just needs to keep doing what he's doing in 2021. Thirdly, and I'm going to go into two factors here that aren't actually anything to do with Red Bull themselves, but I still think they need to happen if Red Bull are going to challenge for the title. Firstly, so third overall, Valtteri Bottas. They need Valtteri Bottas to be the B version Valtteri Bottas. Simply put, I see there are two different versions of Valtteri Bottas. There is an A version and there is a B version. The A version is what we saw in 2017 and it's what we saw in 2019. And that is the ultimate number two driver. When Valtteri Bottas is on it, when he is consistent enough, and consistency's always been his one big drawback, when he's got that, he is a great number two driver for someone like Lewis Hamilton. And if you look from Mercedes' perspective, they've been able to attain the same amount of success in the Bottas-Hamilton era as they were in the Rosberg-Hamilton era without the friction that came with that Rosberg-Hamilton partnership. So when Bottas is on it, he is a brilliant number two driver. The problem is his B version sometimes comes out, and I think it came out last year, 2020, and 2018 as well, which wasn't a great year for him. You'll be able to see it in the points as well. You can see the percentage points that Valtteri Bottas is responsible for at Mercedes. So you can see the 2017 and the 2019 figures are pretty respectable. So you have 45.66% in 2017 and 44.11% in 2019 of Mercedes combined points. That isn't a statistic that would look out of place if it was Nico Rosberg who was attaining that amount. However, you can see the B version in 2018 and 2020, where that figure dips to 37.71% in 2018 and 38.69% in 2020. That is a step down for Valtteri Bottas, and you could argue that some of it is down to bad luck. I would agree with it to an extent, but I think there's more to play than just that. So I think that's what they need. I think if they get the A version of Valtteri Bottas, Red Bull don't stand a chance. If they get the B version, like was the case in 2020, then all the other factors combined, they might have enough to do it. Fourth, looking at Lewis Hamilton. And I think this might be the most difficult one. This might be the most unlikely to happen. But I think Lewis Hamilton needs to regress in 2021 for Red Bull to stand a chance. It's going to happen at some point. You know, Lewis Hamilton, there hasn't been many signs of it, or if any signs of it up until this point whatsoever. Age is undefeated. He will start to regress at some point if he doesn't retire before that happens. It's just a case of when that happens, and secondly, in what form that happens. Some drivers seem to fall off a cliff's edge. Some drivers seem to gradually decrease as the years go on. At some point it's going to happen. I think they need it to at least start to happen in 2021, even if it is only minor. You have to bear in mind that Lewis Hamilton is either just about to turn 36 or he has turned 36, depending on how lazy I am about getting this video out. So he is already, based on his 2020 title win, the fourth oldest driver since 1980 to win a championship. It's only Nigel Mansell at the age of 39, Alain Prost at the age of 38, and Damon Hill at the age of 36 that were older when they won the title, which of course, based on when they were driving, means that he is the oldest champion of the 21st century. So he is getting up there in terms of years for an F1 driver. Like I say, this might be the most unlikely to happen, and I don't even think it needs to be by a great deal. Maybe it does just need to be a few chinks in the armour where the consistency isn't quite there. Rather than doing it 4 out of 5 weekends, he only does it 4 out of 6 weekends. I know it seems minor, but I think it's something that needs to happen in order for Red Bull to win. Number 5, I think they need to maintain their quote-unquote non-driving advantage. And when I say non-driving, I'm mainly referring to two things. I'm referring to strategy and I'm referring to pit stops. To focus on strategy first of all, I have said many times before, I think Hannah Schmitz is the best in the game when it comes to strategy, and Red Bull seem to always be on top form. I don't think Mercedes are necessarily lacking in that department, and you could very well argue that because of their position of dominance, they don't need to show their hand in terms of their strategic know-how as much as Red Bull need to. And it's going to be really interesting because Red Bull have always been in a position where they've got very little to lose. They've always gone for the alternate strategy, the strategy that doesn't seem to be the plan A for most teams. And they've been able to do that. They haven't been in a championship fight, and they might as well have gone ahead because if they go with the same strategy as Mercedes, they're likely to lose. If they get in a position where a championship is viable, or at least a championship fight is viable, we might have to see a different version of Red Bull strategy, or at least the strategy we haven't seen in quite a long time, going back to sort of the 2010s, 2013 era when they were cleaning up and winning races. We might need to see them lead from the front. We might need to see them think like Mercedes, and we'll have to see if they maintain that strategic advantage when they're in that position, as opposed to constantly chasing as they have been in the last few years. The other element to it is pit stops, and I find it quite ridiculous how much of an advantage Red Bull have in this department. If you're going to look at last season, 17 races overall, in 15 of the 17 races, Red Bull had the fastest pit stop. Now, if that was done in terms of wins rather than in terms of pit stop wins, any car that won 15 out of 17 races would very rightly be put up there as one of the best of all time. And you could argue that keeping your advantage in the pit stops is even more difficult than on the track in the sense that you know in terms of your overall budget that you've only got 1 or 2 teams that are going to be threatening you for race wins. Theoretically, every single team has the same amount of people manning the wheels and such. It makes it a more even playing field, I think. Yes, there is probably still a training and budget deficit, but I don't think it's that much compared to an on-track experience. So 15 out of 17 wins is ridiculous. And if you're looking at the last 9 races, they clean that up as well. So they just need to keep going with that. Mercedes seem to have developed into a sort of a 2.5, 2.7 standard pit stop where they feel very comfortable that they know they're not going to make mistakes at that moment in time. Asterisk Sakia. They do a very good job with it, but rarely are they actually threatened to the point where they are in a direct pit stop battle and they need to get them out in 2 seconds or 2.2 seconds. Be interesting to see if they do get dragged into something like that, whether they can keep that consistency. The 6th point, for me, this might be the most important one. It's either this one or the one after. They need to show up early. And this is something I posted on Twitter just a few days ago, because I find it so staggering that I felt as if the people needed to see this. How much Verstappen's pace and how much Verstappen's performance varies depending on the time of year. So Max Verstappen has 10 wins at the time of recording in Formula 1. And 5 of those 10 wins have happened in October, November or December. Mostly when they don't have a championship fight on their hands anymore. Red Bull are very, very, very good at developing their cars throughout the season, but they are not very good at starting quickly. That absolutely needs to change if they are to stand any chance whatsoever when it comes to challenging Mercedes. And I just want to read these statistics because, again, I think these are baffling. If you were to look at all races that Verstappen has done for Red Bull from March through to September, so he's done 67 of them overall. And like I say, he's got 5 wins in that time period. And he's got 24 podiums as well. So that gives an overall podium percentage, 35.82. So in races from March to September, Verstappen is on the podium about once in every 3 races, just over that mark. If you're to look at races that have happened in October, November and December exclusively, 29 races, so significantly fewer podiums at 18, but given the difference in the amount of races, that is still remarkable, and of course he has those 5 wins again. His podium percentage goes from 35.82 to 62.07. That is a ridiculous increase, to the point where in over 3 of 5 races, he is getting on the podium in those few months. But at that point, it does not matter, because they are already out of contention. That needs to change. He needs to start strong, or they need to start strong. They need to give him a car capable enough in the early months of the year and see if they can put the pressure on late in the year. And lastly, the last point I'm going to make is about reliability. Mercedes have been nothing less than bulletproof when it comes to reliability, and that goes back a number of years. You know, if you were to look at the last 5 years, Mercedes have had a combined total of 6 retirements due to reliability, which is just a remarkable tally. Consider that 2 of those happened at the same race as well, Austria 2018. So that goes back all the way to 2016. Bear in mind also, Max Verstappen, he had 5 retirements in 2020 due to reliability alone. So Max Verstappen has finished just 1 short of the entire Mercedes team in 1 year compared to the Mercedes team in 5 years. And if you're to look at overall numbers in that time, of course, Mercedes having 6, Red Bull have 28, so nearly 5 times as many. Now, you can look and see 2019, I thought they had it cracked. They were very close to Mercedes in terms of reliability that year. If they can get back to that level of performance, then that should suffice. But if they start to rack up retirements, particularly that we saw in 2017 and 2018, but even in 2020 as well, they start to do that, it's not going to happen. It's definitely not going to happen at that point. Again, I'm not going to say whether I think this will happen, whether I think there is a chance that this happened, or whether this is all some sort of pipe dream for the team. But for me, those are the 7 things that absolutely must happen. Otherwise, Red Bull, again, are not going to be picking up a championship. And that wait since 2013 will carry on. But I'm very interested to know whether you think that all of those stars can align, whether you think all of those stars do need to align in order for Red Bull to take that overall victory. Let me know in the comments what you think. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until the next one, I'll see you later. Keep breaking late.